Hello again, I'm Fair's Fair, and we're at part 2 of the thing you should have seen part 1 of. Maybe go watch part 1. And I'll bet you're wondering where the alliteration went. Well, after 6 tries I decided that I wasn't making another take, so you're not getting alliteration this time. But we're here to talk about the Legend of Korra, and why the insane amount of hate online really doesn't seem to be justified. It doesn't appear to be as bad as they all claim it is. It certainly isn't M. Night Shyamalan's Avatar bad. It's not The Last Jedi bad. It's not Disney Star Wars bad. So why are people acting like it is? First thing is definitely first, no. It's not as good as Avatar. You're right. That was never really in dispute. Moving on from that, we have to talk about why people don't like Korra. Well, the Legend of Korra, that is. Not, well, yes, her, but also the show around her. And we'll do the easy ones first. Vague writing is bad. There's bad writing. The characters are bad. The villains are bad. They're poorly written. It's shit written. All kinds of vague comments that don't really mean anything that they heard a YouTuber say, and after not enjoying the show, they just assumed that their ultra sixth sense had detected the bad writing, and this was why. Now, don't get me wrong, there's definitely evidence of bad writing hidden in there. There is in every show. No show's perfect. Perfection is not reachable. However, you're going to have to do better than just it's bad. There was a substantial amount of complaining about her being a lesbian, saying it's forced SJW, it's forced identity politics. I'm not getting into politics. Fuck your politics. No one cares about politics. Politics aren't important. But they complained that Korra turned out to be a lesbian. Oh no. Well, it didn't really have a massive shift on the show, and they only sorta kinda confirmed it at the end, because it wasn't important to emphasize it, because it didn't really change anything. And her relationship that seemed to grow with Asami seemed to be pretty natural. And it is also part of why she seemed so unhappy in her other relationships. She just really wasn't going to work out with the guys. I thought it was pretty well written, not very forced at all. It didn't seem super levered in like the political comments that Funimation puts into their dubs. If you want to have politics in your show, then they better make sense to be in there. If you want to make a political statement through your show, do so inside the world of the show. Don't lever it in with a crowbar by having someone explicitly and loudly state something political with nothing around it. That's not what they did here, and I think they did it pretty well. And honestly, I kinda saw it coming. Like, the Yuri ships were happening in Season 1, folks. And the odds are there'd be at least one lesbian or gay avatar, right? Like, how many avatars have there been, and none of them were? Come on, eventually they gotta wonder. There's at least a half dozen or more guys inside of her recently in history. So, I mean, some of that personality gotta bleed over, right? At the end of the day, it didn't affect much and it didn't feel forced, so I'm not really gonna care about it. And I don't think you should either. Another thing claimed is that there's drama about work, and they're not grouped together through a lot of it. Well, yeah? These aren't children. They're adults with lives and jobs and presumably rent at some point. The very fact that she doesn't have a place to stay and was sleeping in a park was a plot point at one juncture. They have to have jobs, they have to make money, they have to live their life. What are you expecting them to do? Come on! I think they played it off decently well. It's not a significant point. Besides, the focus is on the world and how it all interacts, not on how her gang of freedom fighters runs around the world saving everyone. Because, big spoiler here, there isn't a whole nother clearly evil, super evil for evil's sake, evil villain for her to fight. Because that's not how the real world works either. You won't find someone who's just a madman seeking power. Well, okay, you might, but I said we weren't talking about politics. Now, there are some bigger points that are considerably more valid than those. The world advanced quick, and a lot of people were happy to point this out. They went from a relatively sword and shield based area to something that had cars and automobiles or airplanes and zeppelins and giant metal structures. Industrial. Relatively quick. A single generation. Well, I mean, that's kind of how it was in America too, but, you know, we're just gonna ignore that. And also, the Fire Nation had some kind of basic engine for their tanks and working jet skis that floated on the water while being made of metal. So, clearly, their metallurgy and technology and access to infinite fire and heat gave them a leg up in rotary engines of some kind. So, you're wrong. The technology was there, it just wasn't properly advanced and implemented. And the Earth Kingdom scientists definitely helped. Oh yeah, and the giant fucking drill kinda seemed beyond their technology just a little. But don't quote me on that. Alright, you got me there. There was some technology in Korra that wasn't quite in line. The giant robot mechs were, well beyond their means. I don't know how the magic of the spirit world works, since, you know, the magic of the spirit bending works, but I guess I can buy the giant one? But the smaller mechs seem to be using some kind of weird technology. Even the shock gloves seem a bit beyond their ability, at least to mass produce. But at the same time, this is also a world that has canonical growing rock crystals that are also candy and luminescent. So I'm not exactly sure where the line is drawn. Their animals all seem to have various abilities, and oh yeah, their spirits and dragons are real. So, I don't know. There's some line somewhere, but I'll allow the mechs to exist inside of the suspension of disbelief. Not to mention, if I invalidate it because of that, I also have to invalidate every diesel and steampunk story ever. And I really don't want to do that. But yeah, I'll give you a point. Those are a bit out there. Like I said, it's not as good as Avatar. Is that absolutely world-breaking? Well, they didn't super explain any of it, so I guess it's not? That doesn't necessarily mean it's good, it just means that they haven't specifically broken any of their own rules yet. But hey, at least there wasn't a giant magic turtle handing the answers to anyone. And of course, there's the complaint that the culture is more American Industrial Revolution than the original Asian cultures. While based on ones from our world, they are significantly different. Everyone speaks the same language. There's a lot of weird interplay there. They are based on ones from our world, but they are not those ones from our world. And that's kind of what the Industrial Revolution is. It's what it's going to be like. That's what it was everywhere. That's also around the time of the westernization of Asian fashion, where suits became more popular over there, and things like the Japanese kimono started to fall to the wayside. I don't necessarily see that as a good dispute. Now, there's always the dispute that it's not all one story. It doesn't have that long, overarching thing. Well, it's over a significantly longer period of time. Aang mastered all 4 elements in a fucking summer. Something that no Avatar had done before. A single summer, and he mastered everything? I mean, granted, there was a magic turtle that helped, but, you know. Life doesn't usually work that way. They aren't fighting a whole nation, they're fighting a couple groups of people with particular ideologies. And frankly, stretching each one out into 4 seasons would feel like they're just pushing it too far. These issues, while very important and world-threatening, are not the kind of issues that will just idly sit by in the background. The Fire Nation trying to conquer the world, I believe, idly sat by because the world was fucking massive. It would take forever to get anywhere, and the Fire Nation didn't have blimps for a long time. They were in a much shorter time period, too. They couldn't have the Avatar series last that long, because, well, the Fire Nation would have won before they did anything. Also, side note, kind of strange how, you know, a group of children took on the entire militaristic nation of the Fire Nation and walked away losing relatively few people. Like, out of Aang's central group, no one died. and he himself did not suffer major injury outside of Azula striking him with lightning, which was a baller move. Absolutely beautiful, and it added more cost. And I enjoy it when they have to pay for victory, when it is clear there is a cost to failure, and even not succeeding the right way will cost you something. Love that. It adds risk and value. Wait, no, hold on. What was I talking about? Korra, right. But like I said, not fighting a whole nation, so it's kind of understandable that given a much longer time frame and not fighting an entire war, these things would not fill 4 seasons. And you shouldn't really expect them to. I felt like every villain had enough character and development and enough time on screen. Unlike Ozai, they didn't sit in the background as something just vague and potentially threatening happening behind the whole story. They had a more active role in their actual deeds, which, you know, made them seem like they believed in it. So I don't consider it a problem that there was a different villain for each season, since they still all got plenty of time to be a villain. But we'll talk about villains later. Let's talk more about, well, other characters, because characters are a big focus. A lot of people say the characters were written pretty shittily, and admittedly, the character development is not as good as it was in Avatar. You can't have as much screen time in Legend of Korra. They didn't have as much opportunity to be useful, and it's very important, and something you should take notes of when writing, if a character has no purpose to be in a scene, don't leverage them into the scene just to force character development. If they have no reason to be there and wouldn't be a help to the scene, don't put them in the scene! But yeah, heroes. Mako. Yeah, he was kind of a basic bitch. Probably drinks pumpkin spice. And he was arrogant in, you know, kind of an adult way in which he was kind of stuck in what he believed was the right thing and wouldn't take "I'm wrong" as the appropriate acceptance. I know you're all probably having flashbacks to every adult you've talked to in the real world, but yeah, I suppose he had a consistent character with a little bit of an arc. His arc honestly felt kind of small. So you would be right, Mako is not the best written character because he doesn't have much of an arc. But then again, he didn't have an obscenely long path to go. All he had to do was learn to trust people who were trying to do the right thing. Which is, you know, I guess a good arc. It just took him a while to get anywhere, and it doesn't feel like he moved much because that's not a huge accomplishment. Being able to trust that your friends are not maliciously planning to do something stupid is not a huge jump in faith. Though, given his friends, it might be. And then there's his brother Bolin. Yeah, okay. Way too much silly. Like a constant Boomy, but the show already had a constant Boomy with Boomy. It didn't need another one. But his arc had a lot more urgency, which is why it's so strange. They made him so silly and more appeal to the kids, which is something you should never do in a general audience show. Make it enjoyable by kids, but don't try to lure them in with some silly clown man. You're not going to buy anything with that. As a character, I kind of hated him, but his arc had great urgency. He had love, he had relationship, he had antisocial problems that probably stemmed from the fact that he only ever followed his brother around for a lot of his life, only really acting as the little brother, so he never really got to be him, developing his own powers, developing his own passions, his own beliefs, fleshing it out, maybe realizing that he made a massive mistake somewhere along the line, almost blowing himself up in a suicide attempt with a mad scientist. He had to really explore himself. So he had a real, actual arc. And he became a real bender with real skills that were actually applicable. He learned one of the most extreme forms of earth bending, lava bending, which is amazing. The man truly fleshed out as a character and, well, was there more than Mako. Mako was his own aloof self for far too long, and it kind of made me disinterested in him. So, yeah, point there on Mako, you're right, he wasn't super urgently written. So I guess he doesn't really fit as a main character. Bolin, however, somehow manages to be a better main character. I'll just never understand why they decided to make him shift violently back and forth between someone who is reasonably emotionally intelligent and sensitive with a decent mind into a fucking clown. The only reason I can figure is that they told someone in the executive branch that this was a show for children, and then an executive pointed out they didn't have a funny clowny character and they needed one. Because children couldn't possibly understand any show or character that doesn't have at least one of them comically overreacts to literally anything at least twice an episode. I miss the days when creativity wasn't focus grouped out of entertainment. But anyway, then there's the halfway through first season introduced Asami. She lost someone, not through actual physical loss, well, not at first, but originally lost someone through ideology, and had a beautiful story and arc about having to come to terms with the fact that she still cared for her father, even if she really didn't want to, due to the ideology he had subscribed to, but she still loved him anyway. And she couldn't move past that. He was still her father, and she still cared for him. And he still cared for her. His ideology he thought was helping her. And even he had a character arc where he got to learn that he wasn't helping her. Holding on to hate wasn't helping him. It wasn't helping her. It wasn't fixing anything. It was just broadening a divide that he was perpetuating. He was making everything worse, and he was driving his loved ones away, even when she didn't want to be. Wait, means even he had a better character arc than Mako. Yeah, okay, so I'll give you all the points on Mako. He was pretty shitty as a character. In addition to all of this emotional journey, she also had fighting skills for a good reason. He had a reason to teach her from a very young age how to fight for herself, and she became good at it. He also had the money to get her the best teachers, so that's naturally something she would be good at. It makes sense for her to be good. And in a realistic amount of time, because, you know, her whole life she'd been training for this. Meanwhile, Sokka went from barely functional warrior to master in under a year, but we're not going to talk about that in this episode. Even though we never did talk about it in the last one. And on to, frankly, my favorite topic, and the one of considerable contention, actually. The villains. We'll start with Amon, the first one. First and foremost, he was kind of right. He was all for equality. He wanted the equalists. He wanted to take the bending away from all benders, because it was unfair that they flaunted their power and abused it to get ahead. That was pretty bad. And he was right. Amon was correct. Say it every way you want to, complain about it every way you want to. Amon was right. There were people in their world who were simply born more powerful, born better for certain jobs. Frankly, I'm amazed this wasn't an issue in Avatar. I mean, dear God, could you imagine trying to work at an iron mine back in the Avatar days? Well, I can haul a cart up and down that hill all day if you want me to. Ah, cool, if there's a cave-in, what do? Well, I die and or pick away at it with a shovel for a really long time. Okay, what about you over there? Well, I can, lift a 30-ton rock over my head by waving my arms at it. Who gets the job, folks? How about you? I need someone to work the boiler inside of my ship and ensure it stays up at temperature. Well, I can throw wood into a fire. I can literally produce fire from my hands. Who gets the job? They have a job advantage, and in Legend of Korra, one of the better parts, there are jobs at a power plant where more regimented education on firebending and its many uses have taught people that lightning bending is a thing, and you can just create electricity. So you can work at a power plant using a converter to convert lightning. They pay you to make power for the city so they can help keep the city well powered beyond what they normally generate. That is a job that literally can only be occupied by a bender. The pro bending circuit, if you were not born a bender, you cannot play. It is one of the most famous sports in the entire city. It is how you become a celebrity and make money. You can't play unless you bend. It's not equal. There are people who are absolutely better born in their world for the world they had. And because of this, there was almost always a bender on the council for whatever nation that it was representing. This means that they often had a divide between them, because the benders always had better job options, they had better access to things, and frankly, in a fight, with equal amounts of work, the bender always wins.
But fair, look at Sokka. Look how great a warrior he become and all he accomplished. How can you say such stupid things?
First of all, how dare you mock me with some kind of insult, calling me stupid? I would never mock you. Second of all, he trained his ass off to become supposedly a master in a ridiculously short amount of time. There's a reason he didn't fight Ozai, because Ozai would have creamed him. Ozai led a nation and also trained to be a master bender, and he would have absolutely creamed the poor fuck. Toph could kick his ass up and down a hill. A master bender will always win against not a master bender. The Equalists sought to fix this with technology and numbers, because non-benders outnumber benders. They had to use numbers and hyper-advanced technology. Why? Because they would lose otherwise! So Amon was right, and the way he worked out was good. He had a reason for what he was doing, he believed in what he was doing, and funny enough, I don't take him to be a hypocrite, because I very much believe that based on his ideology, after he took away every bit of bending in the world, he intended to kill himself. He intended to take away his own bending or die. This man had been abused his entire life by a bender who believed benders were the superior race, and he was going to show the benders that they weren't superior. He was going to erase them. He's like an anti-Nazi, which ironically led him to be a Nazi against an entire different demographic, but we won't go into that. And at the end of it all, his brother, escaping with him, knew that there was no place that they could go, there was nothing left for them, and neither of them really was convicted to life. Their father had destroyed that in them. His political career was over, his brother's revolution was over, neither one of those things was coming back, and there really wasn't a starting over. So tearfully, his brother made the decision to just step out. And I understand his decision to do so. I understand why he would think that's okay, and I could understand why his brother maybe even knew he was gonna do it and let him. This villain had a purpose, and he realized it couldn't be brought to fruition. All that was left for him was persecution and pursuit. He had a rise, he had a reason, he was right, and he had a fall. I appreciated his story and liked him as a villain. Then you have Unalaq. He worked for rejoining the spirits, because people had forsaken them. He was right. Again, a good villain has a bit of truth in his philosophy. People had forsaken the spirits. He was correct. They had. Aang had issues with this before, with Heibai, and it only got worse. He was actually moving towards something good. Unfortunately, he took it too far and was seduced by his own ego. He decided that, well, the Avatar hadn't fixed it in the past, the Avatar caused it by sealing the portals, and this really nice dark evil looking guy has told me that rebalancing by destroying Rava and then bringing out Vaatu would inherently fix things. Which kind of tracks, actually. The waterbenders have always been about push and pull, yin and yang, up and down, light and dark. That was the whole thing with the two fish, that was the whole thing with their element. It is about balance. Balance with the spirits, balance with good and evil, balance with light and dark. And balance with Vaatu and Rava within the Avatar. And who better to be the new Avatar with both of them within him than him? After all, he was so much smarter than everyone else by figuring this out. The point is, this man had a lot of ego and a lot of drive. He's actually more like Ozai than you might think, because he had a mad ego that made him believe that he was just in what he was doing and wanted to enforce his will upon the world because he was so sure that what he was doing was right. The only difference is Ozai was just taking over, whereas this guy was actually doing something that you could perceive as correct. He was reuniting the spirits and the people, which was the right thing to do. Korra did it. But he believed that there needed to be a balance among the Avatar as well. Him and her, proper balance. And then there was that giant whole magic spirit fight with the great spirits involved near the time of a thing, and look, at least there wasn't a giant magic turtle this time. At least there wasn't a turtle. And, oh my god, cost! Something was paid. She won, but in failing to win initially, she lost all of her past lives. Doing the right thing by the spirits also cost her the respect of Republic City and people, who had grown really used to not having to care about the lands that they were destroying that were fueling the spirits. Really sucks when the, people fueled by the land you've been destroying come back and say, hey, yo, maybe you don't do that. Which the people of Republic City did not like, because it did not like having to care about the spirits, or indeed recognize that what they were doing might not be the best thing for them. But more than that, the spirits were a nuisance to them. They didn't want to live with these new things, even though they were old things. They had thrown them in the past. We don't want to go back to that. So that, and the cost of losing all her past lives' knowledge, was huge. Absolutely. A major cost. And it only furthered things with awakening Zahir, making him an Airbender. Wait, Airbenders are real? Now, this isn't canon or anything, but I mentioned in my last video that the Airbenders, how did they know they got them all? That's absolutely ridiculous. They can fly in every direction at once, and they are nomads, so the idea that none of them are traveling is retarded. I don't know. Maybe some of them did get away. Maybe they interbred. We know that bending is sort of genetic, partially. A bunch of people who never learned that they were even capable of bending and or did not inherit bending. Maybe they had just enough blood in them, or just enough spiritual acuity left over from the Airbender blood from way back in time that it just awakened a few people. That would explain why Boomy was one of them. After all, he has some pretty significant Airbender blood in him. But that's unconfirmed, so I'm not going to give it to Legend of Korra. No benefit of the doubt here. I'm not giving it to you on this one. You're going to have to take this hit. Why did those people become Airbenders? I know the Airbenders are the most in tune with the spiritual side, which, Korra didn't have because she was raised by the White Lotus, who pretty much taught her, you will be the best, you will be the good, you will be the balance. Hero, 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 teach, teach, teach. Not exactly an organic way to get in touch with other cultures and the spirits of the land. But Zahir, he was pretty good. He was the perfect person. He was a very spiritual person, with great respect for the air nomads, because they didn't really follow any dogmatic hierarchy. That's kind of why he was perfect for it, and why his philosophy fit so well. Because he didn't believe that the hierarchies could be trusted to properly lead. He believed that people should be, well, a bit more independent, a bit more like the air nomads. Be willing to let go of the physical power that you have. Embrace the spiritual power you have. And more importantly, stop supporting the hierarchical command systems, especially the monarchy, that is constantly enforcing this material gain system. He wasn't necessarily wrong either, because the people in power had, throughout the last 2 seasons, very much been at fault for 90% of the problems. And also a whole bunch of the problems in, well, The Last Airbender. The Dai Li, and, you know, the dude who was manipulating the Earth King. The Water Tribe leaders who refused to really leave their nice little cubby hole. The hierarchy of the Fire Nation, which, well, we know what was wrong there. Every major issue has been coming from the top down, and it's always been the little guy who dies because of it. So, Zahir got up, and, well, he hosted his team. He wasn't entirely wrong, either. Because their failures and uselessness had been an issue, and the White Lotus was just supporting those people and training the Avatar to be the defaultly good person. You will be right. You will be good. Well, who says? How do you know the Avatar's right? How do you know the Avatar's good? He doesn't. As such, he decided that, well, the Avatar can't be trusted to be the divine good. If you have one person who's constantly reaching a following and has a powerful ally like the White Lotus, then there will never not be a hierarchy because these people will insist that she is in the right because she's the balance and the bridge. And none of that was even supposed to be. She wasn't supposed to be the bridge. Juan sealed the portals, and that was a mistake. We went over this. They went over this. And frankly, I loved Zahir. I'd say Amon and Zahir were my two favorites out of all the villains. Zahir maybe beating her out, because in Zahir, it was an absolute amazing season. The 4 people he brought together were amazing. They individually exemplified the greatness of what they could do. Also, they showed you, you know, what a Firebender prison would look like. What a Earthbender perfect prison would look like. What all these prisons looked like. And, well, okay, yeah, they failed on the Airbender one, but he wasn't an Airbender when they put him in there. The water girl was over a volcano. Almost no water. No way she could use her bending technique. The Earth guy was on a wooden boat, probably using wooden shivs to hold it together. You know, the old school boat making, where you use tar and just spikes of wood hammered into wooden holes and then tarred over. Or, well, not tar, but, you know, some kind of lacquer or something. It was a boat made perfectly for him. There was no earth. There was no metal. This was perfect. Then you've got the Fire Nation one. This was actually beautiful. It involved Fire Nation metallurgy to melt the ice and sink iron beams into them. And then it involved the Arctic glacial fissures, which, if you've ever seen one in real life, they're deep, they're terrifying, and you'll die if you fall in one. I'm sorry, there's just no way you're surviving. And a firebender using her style would not survive. The prison was designed so that she could not get out under any circumstances. That door was well reinforced, it was kept very cold to make firebending very hard, and if she tried to weld her way through it, she may very well accidentally melt some of the ice, and or blow off the side of it, causing her to fall into the crevice. Any attempt to escape violently ended up in you falling into the crevice. Any attempt to escape slowly would be noticed, and they could drop you into the crevice. And once you're out, you can't get up the cables because there are guards watching who will cut it and just let you fall into the crevice. It was a perfect firebender prison, one that they did not have when Ozai was in charge. Too bad about that. And his team was amazing. They had story, they had character, each one of them seemed to have a personality that was well fleshed out and made sense, and they were, you know, not terrible people. They didn't just straight up kill Bolin. They chatted with him. They talked with him. They didn't want to kill him because that's not what they were doing. He was an average schmuck. They were using him to get to the real target, the hierarchy power he knew. He was not part of a hierarchical system. He was just a guy. They killed the Earth Queen. That scene was breathtaking. I'm so sorry. But they didn't want to kill the average civilian. They wanted to free them. And the way they all went through was, well, beautiful yet sad. One of them died and, well, I didn't feel super remorse for her. Oh yeah, spoilers. And the guy who loved her, well, he pulled the whole roof in on himself. He's gonna kill us all. Everyone dies. You killed the woman he loved and, well, I guess he's taking everyone with him. He felt it. He had pain. He had his objective and his love. The objective was all but failing, and his love just died. So he had nothing, and he decided to bring the house down because of it. Hell, Combustion Girl was downright one of the most gruesome deaths I can imagine. I get it was off-screen, but holy shit. Talk about a way to blow someone's mind. I'm so sorry again. But I loved it anyway. And there was a cost here, too. She took to heart what they said. She was not defaultly right. Her past 2 experiences prove that. She was not always on the right side, and even the decisions she made, people seemed to hate her for. She had regret. The White Lotus's teachings telling her that she was going to be the right one, and she had to trust in herself and do the right thing, kind of backfired. What's the right thing? How do I know? What if I can't trust in myself? What if they're right? I'm fallible. And she also lost her avatar state. The mercury poisoning, well, it grounded her, similar to how the lightning bolt did Aang. She couldn't move past it, and mercury poisoning, pro tip, it can do things to you. I'm sure being the avatar gave her some kind of buff to the surviving mercury thing, but mercury poisoning does bad things to your head, man. There's a reason that tear was fallen, and she started hallucinating. It got bad. Some kind of projection of the avatar state her was there, but not. Mercury poisoning does bad things to your head. It can lead to all kinds of mental issues, split personalities, schizophrenia, hallucinations, and oh boy, she was trying to hit the fucking bingo card. It wasn't until Toph taught her how to get the minute amounts of it out of her body that she was actually able to really, well, survive and move forward. And I get the feeling she wasn't entirely okay past that point. She seemed off. Is it just me, or were they drawing tired lines under her eyes a lot more after that? I feel like it took a toll. And that's shown again when we get to the next villain, Kuvira. A lot of people said, well, how come Kuvira is such an OP fighter who can just fight her 1v1? Well, because she was using the avatar state, granting her a boon of lots of power. But none of the past lives were there. She had just recently overcome mercury poisoning, and that shit ain't friendly. And she had lost all of her previous lives. You know what else the avatar state gives you? Access to their knowledge and skill. That's why it made you good. Lots of power is useless if you don't know how to use it. It's generally understood that having a lot of power doesn't necessarily make you the winner. Knowing how to use the power and being skilled does, especially in bending. That's why the chi blockers were taking down the arrogant benders who hadn't really learned to fight this thing known as chi blocking. Absolutely demolished these fuckers. Especially the celebrity ones. But back to Kuvira. She was also, well, kind of right. Republic City was built on Earth land that the Avatar just walked in and said, well, we're building a city here to represent the unity of all 4 nations, and we're going to have each of them have a say in how this neat little piece of land is run. Wait, but that's our land. Right, and we're all thankful for your sacrifice for this cause. Okay. Kinda just declaring that, or do I get a say? Well, it's in the middle. Well, okay, that makes sense. But you know what? Earth Kingdom, I got a lot of land. I'll do it. But Kuvira doesn't see it that way. She sees it through hindsight, which doesn't give her context of day. And, you know, history's written by the victor, so she doesn't necessarily know that it was given over willingly. So she hears Avatar founded this. When she heard that, she heard Avatar took this. Because Avatar. And it didn't help that the Avatar and Republic City were endorsing the monarchal heir, who was somehow even more incompetent than the last one. Like, I couldn't make this shit up if I tried. He was every bit the priss of a prince you'd expect from a spoiled, rotten royal family lavishing in their own money, getting paid constantly just to exist. God, they were a vile dictatorship, and he was the son of a dictator who knew nothing about anything. Funny enough, he even had a story arc where he tried to do better. And after realizing that Kuvira wasn't wrong, he agreed and he moved it to a democratic instead of an autocratic thing. He agreed and moved it to a more democratic election-based ruling system. Because Kuvira was right. She was just going for militaristic authoritarian, he was going for democratic. Both of which was better than the monarchical authoritarian. She just believed that she was the right person for the job because she was competent. And, well, she kind of was. More competent than the last one, at least. But a step up is not necessarily a step in the right direction. You have a more competent leader, so things will be less terrible, but the democratic step was probably the better way to go. And, frankly, she kind of felt like she earned it. And she wasn't wrong there either, because she held the place together after the last ruler died. She held this place together, she fixed everything, she got everyone food, she started reunifying a fractured state, she was getting everything ready because the Earth Kingdom should be together. They should be one. They should be whole. Fractured, they are weak. The Earth Kingdom is all about strength, about unity. And the bigger the kingdom was, the better it would be. She wasn't wrong. All these individual states were just begging for interplay of political wars and just muddying the whole damn water. Not to mention Republic City would be completely lost as to who they should actually be listening to from the Earth Kingdom. She pulled that place from the ashes after Zahir left it in chaos. Funny enough, people didn't take to his, be more individual rhetoric. Zahir had left it in chaos, and she had pulled it from that and reunified it. And your reward for that is you work for this schmuck. Yeah, don't want to sound like some kind of dictatorship here, but I'd probably declare myself in charge too. And I saved this one for last because, past the heroes, past the villains, we have a main character who needs to be addressed. Korra. She made a lot more mistakes than Aang did, mainly because she was a lot more confused than he was, in more ways than one. And part of this is due to how they taught her. They grabbed her from an early age and taught her all about be the Avatar, and all the things that, well, weren't really helpful in the real world when it came to being the Avatar. The White Lotus was severely behind the times on a lot of this stuff. So they didn't really know how to interact in the modern world, and therefore neither did she. She had no experience with the world or cultures because of the White Lotus. And she thought I was supposed to do what's right, what's best for everyone. So she tried to appease the mob. Not the best idea. Mainly because you can never appease the mob. When you fail to consult them about something, there will always be a mob. There was probably another mob who agreed with what she did, but they weren't a mob because they agreed with it. It's really easy for other people to say you should have done something else in the situation after the situation is past. She had to make a lot of decisions in a relatively short amount of time, and she didn't have time to really consult a lot of people. It was easy for them to claim that she should have done it differently. Very few of them actually specified what different, but it was easy for them to say, we don't like what you've done now. And she took it far too far to heart, and that just led to her back and forthing over everything. Mainly because she was constantly being told to balance the world. Like that platitude actually helps anything. Seek balance in all things. Bitch, that's not helping! I need to know who I'm supposed to be siding with here. I need to know at what point we've gone too far. The Benders are definitely abusing their power against the non-Benders, but I don't really think taking everyone's bending away is the right way to go. What's the balance? How far is too far? The empty platitude of balance the world or seek balance in your decisions wasn't helpful, and oh boy did the wise men around her like to keep repeating it like that was somehow going to give her the answer. So she made, well, a mistake. She trusted elected officials. Never trust anything political. Now let's shift gears with no clutch and go to a different topic, because politics. She also seemed to rely less on her past lives, because she didn't have the spiritual side that Aang did. She wasn't raised Airbender. There being no Airbenders left to raise someone Airbender other than Aang and his kids, you'd imagine they should have been a bigger part of her raising. But, you know, I guess the White Lotus was too busy not teaching her enough about spiritualism. And, you know, cramming down their platitudes. Gotta get those in, you know? It's part of a balanced breakfast. Of course, relying on your past lives kinda bit Aang in the ass with that firebending tutor, who was right, while Roku was wrong about Aang. Roku said, "You think I am weak?" Well, no, it's not about whether or not you're weak, it's about whether or not Aang is weak. I know Aang is you now, and you are in him, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's ready yet. And he wasn't. So even the Avatar can be wrong. And that sure came as a mind-blowing realization to Korra, after she'd been told that the Avatar did all the right things all the time, all of all history. So in total, I've heard a lot of arguments against Korra, and while yes, it is not as good as the things I've mentioned, there are things that aren't as good in them. Mako having the personality of a cardboard cutout is possibly one of those. A channel a while ago claimed that the villains had B-grade philosophy. I'm not sure what that means, because, you know, the philosophies they entailed, that is, equality through removing of oppressors or those with too much power, reconnecting with spiritualism or nature, taking down the hierarchy and living in more of an open and free society like nomads, embracing the chaos of nature and moving forward with it, and finally, granting a unity to a fractured state and not letting some ponce in a fucking tuxedo take over who's clearly incompetent and incapable of running the job. Well, I'm sorry, these don't seem like B-grade philosophies to me, for most part, because they have supporters in America today. And second part, because they were right. The issues they brought up were correct. You may disagree with how they intended to fix them. I disagree with how they intended to fix them. They were strong-arm, forceful tactics, and those are never a good idea when you're trying to fix something. Fixing very rarely requires a hammer, unless you're a mechanic, or that one screw isn't fitting properly, or you can't afford a vasectomy. But in most forms, a hammer is not the appropriate tool for fixing something. Each villain had a reason. Each one was at least partially right, just with a flawed way of going about it. And they all made more sense than Ozai. He felt like a madman. He didn't feel like a leader. He felt like the Earth Queen, who was sort of an antagonist, but not really, because she wasn't that interesting. We all just knew she was wrong, which is why we didn't really care when Zahir went in there, waved his hands around, and straight up took her breath away. No, that's not a pun. And that brings me to the most important thing from bending. They brought bending to a whole new level. Airbenders creating vacuums, straight up pulling the breath from your lungs and holding that sphere. Suffocation by void. That's terrifying. Earth can be bent as metal or as lava. Because, I mean, why not? The waterbenders can adjust the temperature of what they're bending. The earthbenders can grind and churn and force it into molten state. That's a whole new level. Firebenders, lightning, and combustion bending were always such super important things. I wanted to see more representation of that, and they brought it. Waterbenders, they have blood bending, but they also have a connection to the ebb and flow of spirits. That's why two spirits fuel their bending. And the ebb and flow of spirits, much like yin and yang, have flow back and forth. So the ability to quell spirits was even something they took from the yin and yang fish. Every bit of bending was brought to a whole new level. And I love that. As society advanced, technology advanced, bending advanced. And beyond bending, something I enjoyed, something that everything should have, victory, and indeed defeat should cost something. It should cost something from your protagonist to go up against an entire nation. It did not cost Aang all that much. He didn't even have to give up his monk's oath because of a giant magic turtle. Though, as someone in the comments of the previous video pointed out, he did straight up murder a buzzard wasp out in the desert for no reason other than he was angry. So, you know, I guess that whole non-violence, I don't eat meat thing ends right around when you get pissed because someone took your sky bison. Then it's okay to just straight up murder an innocent animal that was only doing what its instincts told it. While it was running away from him, I believe, too. But he overall didn't have to spend all that much. He walked out with all his limbs and friends and sanity, despite being a child up against a literal army. Everything cost Korra something. Every step of the fight, every move forward cost her something to push past these people. Because they were powerful people, and they felt more powerful because they cost something. Azula cost something. She cost him the Avatar state. He got a lightning bolt to the back. That was a costly victory. But Ozai didn't cost him anything. He had a magic turtle that just gave him the answer. In conclusion to all this, was it as good as The Last Airbender? No. It will never be. Odds are, if the organic introduction of the many facets of your world is part of your first series introduction, and indeed whole story throughout, the sequel will not regain that magic. It can't. Are the heroes worse? Some of them aren't as good, you are correct. There are, well, some issues. It gets kind of diesel-punky in the technology. The heroes do have some issues among some of them, particularly Mako. I don't know why it spent so much time on him, since they clearly didn't write much of an arc for him. Frankly, I thought it was impressive that they kept working adults as interesting as they did. Do you have any idea how hard it is to keep an adult with rent and, you know, responsibilities interesting in an adventure story? It's kind of hard. But they did have better villains. They had causes and reasons beyond insane. These people had backstories and reasons for what they are. Now, I'm not saying Ozai didn't have a backstory. He was insane because he was never loved and he was raised by a madman. The apple dropped straight fucking down, folks. And that's all well and good, but you can't just have all the villains be crazy. They have to have some motivation beyond that. Even the Joker had motivation beyond just the fact that he was nuts. He always had a point to prove. Insanity was not something that just happened in some people. Insanity was everyone, and everyone was just one bad day away from it. All the Jokers had that in common. Everyone would be a bad person if given the right motivation to be so. So, the villains felt more real. They felt like people. They were on screen and still had a scary aura about them. Amon was really scary. Unalaq, in Avatar form, was kind of edgy. We're going to just pretend Season 2 didn't exist, because y'all have a lot of points on that one. A lot of people bring up Season 2, and it's where a lot of you got lost from the series and never continued. Yeah, Season 2 kind of went out there. Kind of pushed the boundaries of what spirit magic can do. But I guess if you can have giant magic turtles that hand answers at the end of the season, well, you know, I guess I can let that go too. Why not? Nope, changed my mind, not letting it go. That was shit too. Not as shit as Giant Magic Turtle, but still shit. The major cause of hate I'm seeing, nostalgia. They wanted the original experience of watching Avatar again, but can't have that. You can't be introduced again. The world they live in would have to move forward. They wanted the original experience again, and I get it. You wanted the beautiful story. You wanted not only the innocence of your character and integration and lack of knowledge from the world, but you also wanted the innocence and lack of knowledge of the world that you had while experiencing it back. Whether you were an adult or a child, you wanted that feeling of discovery from the first series back. You wanted those old times back, and that's fine. You can want them back, but frankly, I'd rather experience new times than lament the ones that are gone. It's okay to lament on your own time, but don't let it stop you from moving forward. As for my own personal opinion, which I suppose is separate from writing, but me, I'm a sucker for a villain, so I liked this more. But yeah, the writing lightning wasn't a perfect double strike. But it's not as bad as they say, or more accurately, scream into the void, into the face of anyone who will listen, or anyone who dares to say they enjoyed this. They're welcome to think it's shit and have the opinion that it's bad, and like the original one better. Go right ahead. It has better writing, so you probably should. So you can disagree, you can agree, you can give me the points you didn't like about this video, the points you did like, where you disagreed with me, where you did agree with me, in the comments below. You can like, comment, and conform to the algorithms, as our overlords dictate that we shall. All hail our lords and saviors, YouTube, Facebook, Google. I revere and respect you, please don't kill me. But since many of you aren't going to agree with me, and indeed are probably going to dislike me into a black hole of oblivion, because I've said the no-no words, so you know what to do. Go down to the comments, and be entertainingly angry.